Thank you, Jamal. That was fantastic. Our next speaker today is Omar Khawaja from Roche. Omar is a data and analytics thought leader. He brings a customer centricity that puts the end user in the center, a breath of fresh air, I think, in the data community. Omar currently leads the BI and analytics solution services team for Roche Diagnostics, responsible for developing and driving the execution of their BI and analytics strategy. Roche Diagnostics was an early adopter of data mesh, and his title today for his speech is Mind, Body, Heart, and Soul, describing four principles that those represent that helped them on their data mesh journey. I'm very excited to hear how the data mesh principles that Jamak speaks to map to mind, body, heart, and soul. So, Omar, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks, Brendan, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here to present to you all our learning journey so far as the implementation of data mesh, which is a big paradigm shift in the world of data and analytics is concerned. My title also says mind, body, heart, and soul. So I will explain about that in a moment, why I called that or why I gave this title to my presentation. Moving on to the next one, before we deep dive, it's very important to highlight that the purpose that our company Roche has is just amazing, that inspires me individually and a lot of my colleagues across the board, which is doing now what patient needs next. In doing so, we are trying to innovate diagnostics solutions, shaping the healthcare and the changing lives for the customers and patients. How do we achieve that? We have a data and architecture as one of the key strategic enablers as part of our business strategy. And we aim to unleash the power of data and data products and drive better outcomes for customer and patients with the data. You know, the typical or traditional approaches towards unlocking the power of data, which I'm all sure you all have done that as well, started long time ago. This is not new. I myself have been involved in creating data marts, data warehouses in a local or a regional, global level in big enterprises for past 2.5 decades. And then with the advent of new technologies, the data lake came in with more focus on doing data science, advanced analytics work, changing from the typical ELT approach to ETL approach to ELT approach. But at the same time, all of these approaches have some shortcomings. To name a few, it always had taken so much time in designing and knowing everything from day one when it comes to data warehouses. Over the period of time, we have also been limited with whatever the technologies were also offering. So we kind of driven from the technology side. When the data lakes became quite hot topic few decades ago now, I guess, they soon became a data swamp. We were just dumping the data in and then forgetting about, hey, why are we doing this? And all these approaches, whether it's a data warehouse or a data lake approach, I would say they were still being driven from the technology side, not from the point of view of other important characteristics when it comes to making the best use of the data within a company or becoming a more data-driven enterprise. And when I joined Roche 2 years ago, I was tasked to create our BI data and analytics strategy. And one of the key things was how do we rethink about our architecture and the practices. And instead of once again creating a data warehouse and instead of once again creating a data lake, that's where the concept of data mesh come in. Luckily, I was also reading a book from Adam Grant called Think Again. Great book, highly recommend as a personal recommendation for everybody to read it. And one of the best quotes that I always remember from Albert Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So referring back to the previous slide, if I've created yet another data warehouse and yet another data lake just by changing from one technology provider to another, think I've been fooling myself to deliver different outcomes. And that's where the article from Jamaat, which was the birthplace of this whole data mesh momentum, and that has been created. That gave us the idea that that approach, that paradigm shift, really hits the spot on various different places. And that's the time when I approached Jamak and took the advantage of pandemic that, hey, we are all unable to come to offices, but yet we are connected in this digital world. So I approached to her in last year in February 2021, and she was kind enough to do a dedicated seminar for us in Roche, where this whole momentum started to get real for us. Based on that webinar, we kicked off creation and learning about data domains, building upon the success of what data domain definitions have already been achieved. We were also already on a journey of creation of a new technology stack, data stack, but how that has changed throughout the year, I will talk about that later in the slides. And we had a lot of learnings even within this journey as we were trying few things on our own. And then we started to also work with Thoughtworks to learn about the data mesh framework and implementation. And we had great learning on how to take a step-by-step structured approach to onboard the data domain teams, define the data domains, how to start their journey from traditional ways of working from project to product. And we have continued across various domains throughout Roche, and I will show you in a few minutes. I think this slide and the four principles within the data mesh community are now well known. It is, I would say, still debatable whether they are well understood or not. And as you see on the slide, I have also named each of these principles as mind, body, heart, and soul, and I will talk about that now. So starting with, of course, domain-oriented decentralization. This is the whole soul of our data mesh approach. To, instead of doing things centrally, decentralize it, have a more domain context about it. Let the people who are close within the business processes, within the systems, close to where the action is taking for that domain, also take the ownership of the data. It's no longer a second-class citizen, but more of a first-class citizen of that domain, which leads to the second principle. And I believe this is the heart of data mesh. You have treatment of data as a product. And if you read through articles and listen to Jamar, she also mentioned something about, we use the term, and I'm guilty of using the term data asset a lot. And one of the key characteristics is all about the mindset thinking. That asset I protect, I don't want to share. But when we talked about data as a product, we are really putting ourselves, or at least inviting ourselves to put the consumer, the end users, those business use cases in front of us first, and treat data as a product so that we can enable more and more reuse and also build it around certain characteristics and principles of data product. This is a big change, and in the next slides, I cover some of the learnings we had. The third principle, I treat it as that skeleton or the body of data mesh. We have, how many of you have built data platforms, right? I think all of us. We start with a project, ends up with a data platform. And I've done that as well. But the key difference, instead of having infrastructure or a data platform team does all the tasks, all the pipelines centrally, their task has changed to enable the data product teams. It's a big shift, one of the many paradigm shifts within the data mesh. And then last, but definitely not the least, when you have so much decentralization, you need federated governance. And if I use properly the term federated computational governance, because we need to automate as much as we can to make the life easier for the data product team, and also make sure that some of the policies, as much as the technologies provide us at the moment, are executed in an automated manner, rather than every team, every domain going into reinventing the wheel. But most importantly, how do we ensure that there is still some governance, there is no duplication taking place? These team dynamics of domains, data product team, platform teams, they are talking to each other. And that's why I call this principle mind behind the data mesh. That's where the decisions are decentralized but yet governed, and they are integrated and they are shared. We have a lot of learnings. By all means, I cannot possibly claim that we are an expert and we have done this. Absolutely not. We have started our journey. We have learned a lot in each of these domains, and I will try to share that by domain in the next few slides. Starting with the data domains. When I joined, I was lucky that even before I joining, a data strategy was put in place, which talked about using the data mesh paradigm, more or less, I would say a pre-art first articles on the data mesh, following the data domain principles that really help us stay grounded and build upon that. That was a very good thing. We had some examples going on where we have identified some owners, and that was a good alignment in terms of IT doing yet another approach or program. We really focused on how we can build upon those data domains and leverage and create the data products within those domains. What we did after our successful start was there may have been little minor misalignment or lack of understanding. What is this data domain? So we came up together with the larger organization, Roche-wide data domain definition, and I would consider that as also part of the governance to align on such uh, certain frameworks, certain words, which can be standardized and reused across the board. And people are not getting stuck in nomenclature and terminologies, and they understand and they follow it. A big part of our implementation and journey so far is to make sure people get same message from all channels. So communication is very important, like it is in any other change management. And considering that data mesh is a big paradigm shift, it is of extreme importance. In terms of the second paradigm, when it comes to data as a product, this is where I believe organization will have an amazing opportunity, but at the same time, big change management journey ahead of them. Many of our organizations and teams have been working in a classic project based approach. So we need to also think from changing that project teams, which are temporary in nature, and then you hand over things to operations, and then you start an enhancement initiative on top of that. Moving away from that approach of three different teams working throughout the life cycle, having one stable team work throughout the life cycle of data as a product. There is a sense of ownership which needs to be established, and that ownership is involve taking the challenges of the poor data quality, even fixing it where required from the domain teams, and this is not easy. We are also learning how to do that. But at the same time, it's not just about creating dashboards and charts at the end of the day. I know that this may sound a little bit controversial, but we need to think beyond that. We need to enable and create data products for multiple use cases. And of course, we will start with some known use cases where insights have to be presented in terms of dashboards and charts. That's a given. But that's the only part of it. That's not where everything ends. And this is a big understanding how to go about doing it. Similar data mesh approach introduces these 7 or 8 characteristics, as you can see on the slide. You might have heard about the FAIR principles. By FAIR, I mean findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we were quite familiar with FAIR, and now we have sort of created a mashup of how these two work together. And uh, making data products fair, it's a journey on its own, whether you start with their definitions or alignment, or where do you make them findable, how do you provide access controls, what techniques do you use for interoperability, and how can we reuse this data for multiple use cases without reinventing the wheel all the time and without making copies of the data all the time. Can we keep the data in one place and then talk about reusing it for multiple use cases? also simplifying our pipelines, our operations. And that has been quite a big journey, which is also related to some technological changes and the needs that the infrastructure platform team needs to provide. So, as I was saying, one of the big changes or the challenges is about changing from project thinking to product thinking. I had fun examples where we have enabled the team, but we didn't do a great job in, I guess, making them aware that, oh, you are the product team. There is no longer some requirements coming in. There is no longer somebody else telling you this. You are the team working together. You are cross-functional. You identify your end user, your customer, put them in the center, address the problem areas they have, prioritize, identify which data products can help fulfill those use cases, and go about delivering them in an agile, iterative manner. Now, it's easier said than done. And I believe that this approach is the heart of this data mesh. That's why I was calling it like this, which changes how you think about creating value for the business, how you put end customer first and foremost in deciding anything. It's no longer about, okay, I'm getting an extract from XYZ system. I will dump it in some bucket or some data lake, and then I will think about what to do. It's completely reversed. We are talking about what outcomes are expected and what outcomes and changes we need to deliver with our data product, and then go about creating it. And when we are creating it, we apply some best practices in data architecture and design thinking so that those products are reusable. That's what makes this approach different than a classic or a traditional approach of data warehousing and data lakes, for example. Few things which Jamak have not yet specifically talked about, but I would like to share what we have started to apply. Putting customer in the center and requires user-centered design processes and approach. So it's about understanding your end user personas of your data products, their customer journeys, how they will consume the data, what kind of possible insights they will need, how they will consume it in terms of devices or the time of the day. And this all drives what you need to create. In terms of architecture, in terms of data modeling processes and systems, we insisted on using an agile methodology rather than traditional methodologies of data modeling, which is somehow linked with star schemas or third normal form or this and that. So we went with Data Vault 2.0. I've had many meetings with many people which have also challenged and made me think, is this the right approach or not? But after all that discussions, we have come to conclusion that both data vault approach and data mesh approach are nicely living together. And we have been doing this now for past 1 year, and so far it is going very well. Data vault approach is used within that data product thinking of how we are creating those source-oriented data products, and so on and so forth. And I think these two ways of working nicely work together. Let's talk about the third principle, the body of the data mesh, right? So as compared to the traditional platforms where the platforms were built and also everything was done by one centralized team, we started our journey with this platform build before we started the adoption of data mesh, and a lot of things were already in place. But we changed our approach in the past 9 months to move from centralized teams doing everything to this centralized team who treat the platform as a product itself, enabler of all those data domain product teams. And this platform is designed based on using this composable architecture. You're looking at from the capabilities point of view, defining what kind of use cases those product teams need, whether it is various capabilities required for different type of data ingestion or data transformations or data visualization, how different type of data access, security, governance management, etc. is needed, and how can we enable automation through data ops with CI/CD pipelines and so on and so forth. So based on that, these capabilities are obviously supported by some of the technologies and tools. And I'm pretty sure you might have seen a version of these slides with all these vendors and tools and technologies here, and I have one too for you to share today. But as you can see, a glimpse of what's happening, that we have these data products created in our one of the key components of our data platform, which is Snowflake. We have our data catalogs on Collibra. We have a nice marketplace on top of that. We are looking at various data ops capabilities, and so on, right? And these, I know people talk about data mesh is not about technology, and I do agree with that statement. It's about those changes I mentioned before in our view, but it is also about technology. You need the right technology to implement these decentralization capabilities. You need these technologies which can support a wide variety of skill sets and capabilities in the people. At the end of the day, people are using the tools, people are creating solutions, products for other end users. Most of the time, we are still creating things for human beings out there. And we need to keep that in mind when we are making these technology choices, that once we are pushing down back to the domain teams, our tools should be able to support wide variety of skill sets out there. We cannot make that life so complicated that the data product teams are unable to work. Otherwise, there is no empowerment. There is no decentralization. We are still making them depend on the platform teams, and that's where the bottleneck becomes. And we have been moving away from this more centralized to more and more decentralized approach in the last 1 year, I would say. Um, this is the journey that I mentioned, where we started with our pilot and towards the end of the last year, and now we are building in a lot of capabilities, as you saw on the slide, and we are keep on adding them. It's an iterative process. Our data product teams are serving us, providing feedback, what is missing, what more needs to be added, and so on and so forth. And that's, I think, a very good mindset to have when creating those enabling platforms for the data product teams. This is, of course, one of the journeys. Without this platform, where will those data product teams go? It doesn't have to be perfect. I can tell you this already. Start with the domain that you have identified, work with them. Both the platform teams and the product teams will learn from each other and grow from there. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. Last and not least, the mind, the brain of the data mesh, my point of view, the federated governance. We are talking about governance at various levels. Within the domain, prioritizing the products, making sure that the product teams are not overlapping, making sure that the product teams are also working together with each other. And depending on the definition of your domain, depending on the culture within the company, depending on the scope and the organization setup, we might see multiple domain teams working within a domain. And then, of course, depending on your organization, you will also see a cross-domain governance requirements. So when we started, we were looking at specific domains only, but now we have grown to the point when we are coming up to the level of cross-domain governance. We clearly see the benefits, we clearly see the needs of having that. And another important thing to prioritize, I'm pretty sure all big enterprises or medium or even small enterprises have some kind of portfolio prioritization process in place. So how are you prioritizing your data product teams or the first use cases? This has to be tightly linked with that. Otherwise, I'm afraid we will end up creating yet another governance body, which may be disconnected with the main governance bodies out there. So I highly encourage that if we can bring them together and not create separate, disconnected bodies, to say the least. Inclusion of the domain teams is important, of course, and at the same time, inclusion of the platform teams in that governance is key to keep that loop completed when it comes to communication and the feedback loop for improvements and the more product and more features creation by the platform team. This is a view of our pipeline across sort of an internal value chain. And you might see on the slide, it's sort of a bottom-up funnel where we have ideas and products being put in MVP, product being under the planning, and few product teams are already working on this across the board. Last but not least, I'm highly grateful to Jamak and her team who has been guiding us and working to her. Thank you so much, and also for this speaking and presentation opportunity. At the same time, there are a lot of resources available on the internet right now. And so I've put together some links on this slide, but I'll simply grateful to the data mesh learning community. Scott, you and few other volunteers are doing amazing job. Please, thank you for all your effort. And now with your data mesh radio, there is a amazing content available for everybody to learn on this big paradigm shift that is taking place. Just to conclude, we have talked about that it's a big paradigm shift. Paradigm shift, of course, means changes. So any organization who's interested or who thinks that data mesh can be the secret sauce or an approach to address your data challenges and keep on adding business value, be ready for those changes. Without changing your approach, without changing your current practices, we will still be doing the old things. And hence, it's important to accept that, yes, a change is required. And those changes with all these four principles addresses the people topic, the process topic, the technology topic, and the data topic. And that's what makes the data mesh more real to me. And there is a lot of hope in terms of implementing this concept to bring the real value of the data in the hands of the end users, our customers, or in our case, our patients as well. So thank you once again. If there are any Q&A, we can take them right now. And if you want to approach me, please feel free to do that on LinkedIn. I wish you all a very good rest of the day or the evening or night. Thanks.